I love bad units. There's just something about booting up a fresh game of Fire Emblem, looking at a unit, thinking, who the fuck developed this stat screen? And then turning them into a god slayer who you claim is meta. Hashtag Rotoban sweep is real. Bad units are something of a lost art in modern Fire Emblem. Sure, there's some members of the cast who perform better than others in games like Engage and Three Houses, but overall, there's not really any bad units in the traditional bad unit sense, like Wendy or Ronan. As a side note, I think that this approach to bad units has kind of seeped into unit evaluation, leading people to overvalue units who are relatively weak simply because they're not as bad as old school bad units. But that's a topic for a different video. In this video, I wanted to celebrate bad units of old by answering the question, who is the worst unit in all of Fire Emblem? It's Bantu. It's Bantu. FE12 Bantu does not have the ability to reclass, and in the highest difficulty he is one-rounded before he's able to attack because all enemies have Vantage Plus. His stats are abysmal, and his growths are even worse. He's also locked to only using Dragonstones, so even with the stat boosts that you get from using Dragonstones, his weapons are going to be weaker because you can't forge them, and well, that was boring. Like, comment, and subscribe. The video's over now. Bye! Well, I gotta fill the rest of the video with something. How about a bad unit tier list? Alright, so, bad unit tier list. Before getting started, I wanted to go over the parameters, because when talking about units from different games, it's always important to remember that we're judging them within the context of the game that they exist in, rather than just comparing them to each other in a vacuum. Like, Larsai has generally better stats than Avel, but I don't think anyone is going to pretend that Larsai is better at base than Avel is at base, or just in general. So, with that in mind, bad units, there's a lot of them. I'm a little overwhelmed by this list. I just pulled them from, people. Some of them are units I think are bad, some of them are units that my community has suggested, some of them are units that my friends have suggested are very bad units. But with this many, I figured I want a capable co-commentator with experience in the ancient arts of bad units. So I called Mythro Zenith. Hey, do you want to introduce yourself, talk about your channel and whatnot?
Sure. Hello everyone, this is Mithril Zenith. I do a lot of Fire Emblem stuff on my channel. I've played every Fire Emblem at least once, although a decent number of them only once, so I'm at least somewhat qualified to talk about, like, the dregs of FE1 and FE3 that no one else has played. I do a lot of tier lists and non-standard tier lists on my channel, so why not? I'll throw my hat into this ring here and help a friend out.
Alrighty. And as you can see, I don't know if anyone has noticed yet, but the tiers are actually in what would be normally reversed order of the worst is the very top, and then not actually bad is the bottom, and in between we got fun meme tier, great land class, but some utility, and outclass, but still fine, TBH. Cause spoilers... Oh.
I was gonna say, I worry that fun meme tier might just be a little overloaded, but we'll get to that.
Well, spoilers, I think some of the units on this list get a bad rap and aren't actually bad units. But we'll get to those, because we're starting with one who I think basically anyone can agree is definitely belongs in the worst of the worst, and that's FE12 Bantu. I mentioned this in the intro that I recorded earlier, but being in a game with Lunatic Plus, or Lunatic Reverse rather, where all the enemies have Vantage, and being locked to one range is bad enough, but then, you can't forge his weapon, his base stats are absolute garbage, he can't even reclass, which is something that every other unit in the game, except for, like, Marth can do. Yeah, I think he's terrible. Do you have any thoughts on Bantu?
Yeah, so Bantu, they can get away with giving Bantu the absolute lowest stats of any unit in the game, including, like, units you get in the prologue, because of the Firestone bonuses, but I think they greatly overestimate the Firestone bonuses. He's not even good on normal. Like, he's not even really that usable on normal. If you're trying to use him in any of the harder difficulties, and FE12 was probably one of the hardest games in the series, In terms of like stat requirements, Bantu just has nothing going for him.
I think that I've seen some meme videos of him being, like, trained to 2020, and I wonder how somebody even had the patience, or I guess it wouldn't be 2020, it's just
you mean
20.
30?
Is it
Or
30?
20?
Whatever his
Is it
caps
30
are.
yeah, whatever it is, it's still bad.
You
Because his
could-
growths also are absolutely garbage too.
Yeah, and he can only use the Firestone, because this is the game that introduced all of the other Manakite stones, but they're locked to Tiki, so he doesn't even get the benefit of, like, flying
even if you
stones.
get them, like if you're playing on Lunatic, you don't even get them because you lose the warp staff.
Oh, true.
But so he, even if you could get them, even on normal, he can't use them. I've never tried, but dang, that's bad.
I forgot that you don't even get access to those stones, so that would hurt Tiki on Lunatic Reverse, but, like, Bantu not getting them on normal mode, because in general, we are factoring in just hardest difficulty, but I do think it's, for the bad units, worth talking about to separate them, the ones that are even bad on normal modes, and I think that, that firmly places him in worst of the worst. I'm not necessarily going to be ordering these tiers. I'll vaguely try to, but I'm not super concerned about, like, what units are going to be better or worse. Exactly.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And we got a lot of units to get through, so...
We do. I hope y'all
we can
like
talk a
Radiant
little-
Dawn and FE6, because there's a lot of them. Do you want to start with Fiona? Oh, sorry.
Sure. Let's just do in whatever order you want. We could do a chronological, we could do, what you think is the worst, but if you have any that you want to throw out, well, sure, let's do Fiona.
Oh, I've just got them randomized on screen here. But yeah, you can...
No worries.
Do you want to talk about Fiona first? I figured we'd alternate.
Sure, yeah. So, Radiant Dawn is a game where 90 to 95% of all your units have at least one chapter where they can be deployed in basically freely and and contribute something. Fiona is one of like the 5% that's the exception, because you get her in Act 1 and then immediately she can't join your party for 2 chapters, so the only chapter she can even join you in for Act 1 is the endgame. And she's like a level 6 Lance Knight with worse bases than Meg. Who I think is also on this list somewhere. Yeah, there she is.
Hiding over there by Wendy and Soph.
And then you get to Act 3, and you're like, okay, hey, cool, I can start using this unit. So every cat and tiger one-rounds her, and you're in a swamp, which means cavalry movement doesn't matter. There are some funny builds you can do with Fiona. She has Savior at base. So it's like, I'm debating whether she's worst of the worst. It's like, because of the way bonus experience works, you can feed her, and if you do level her up, basically, like pretty much the whole Dawn Brigade, she has a breakpoint where if she can promote to tier 2 and, get a couple levels and a decent forage, then she's still perfectly usable, but because she takes so much extra effort to get there, I'm debating whether fun meme tier or greatly outclass some utility. I don't think she's the worst of the worst, but she definitely is. She definitely is actually bad.
I think that she is in greatly outclassed some utility, and it's not because I think her combat is more salvageable than you do. It's because she's the only member of the Dawn Brigade in Part 3. Well, I guess it's her and Jill, but Jill you want to have do combat every turn. She is one of 2 Dawn Brigade members in Part 3 with Kanto, and if you want to do rescue drops or trade Kanto away stuff, she's probably the best person for that. Because if you're using Jill's turn to rescue drop someone, I feel like that's a mistake. I honestly think if you don't deploy her in Part 1, she'll still find a way to be useful in Part 3. Maybe not, like, super useful, but if you want to, like, bring Soth or Micaiah out of danger, I think she can... The fact that she has Kanto access, yes, the swamp, she can't leave that island, but I usually, maybe it's the way that I approach the map, but I usually just hold up on the island and defend myself there anyway. And then on the mountain chapter, I usually defend myself at the 3-tile-wide choke point, where her trading a javelin onto Jill or a javelin onto, well, I guess not Tyronio, but a wind edge onto Zyhark or something can be useful. But I definitely agree that she's
fair.
very, very bad if you try to use her in any role other than trading stuff. And there's no reason to use her after those 2 maps as well. Like, I let her
Mental
die.
utility, and then that's about it. Yeah, you're not going to deploy her unless you go out of your way to specifically use Fiona. She just has no intrinsic value beyond her effective force deployment chapters, and even those are iffy.
Yeah. And I would say that if she dies on one of those chapters, like, you don't necessarily want to reset for her unless you're doing, like, an LTC playthrough where you need her able to Canto or do something on a specific turn. Like, if she dies in the swamp, her Canto utility in the mountain isn't so big a deal that you care, but it's nice to have.
Yeah, if she dies in the swamp, I'm more upset about losing the Savior Scroll than I am about losing her.
Speaking of characters who die and you get mad about losing items, Sophia.
Guiding ring. Guiding ring with extra steps.
So this might be controversial because I've heard some people suggest, like, well, first off, I guess we talk about, like, does she get credit for the guiding ring? Because I don't give her credit for the guiding ring. I consider it to be something that's, like, basically a starting inventory item. Yes, she doesn't start with it, but she's force deployed on the desert map, so it's not like Thieves getting treasure where I don't necessarily count that for her. It's like, do you give Yunaka credit for killing that thief that she basically kills in a cutscene in her join chapter?
Basically. Similar way, do you give Amelia credit for the speed wings that in her inventory?
Yeah. I think it's
I'm not really sure you do.
Like, I think of it as an inventory item. I know that since it doesn't start in her inventory, like, I can understand people who say, oh, she gets it, that's utility she gets. But even then, like, I don't know. Even if you gave her credit for the guiding ring, I don't know that it would really help her that much in a bad unit tier list. Just because, like...
Because she's... I will say she does have one thing going for her, and that's that she is force deployed in a chapter where that puts her at the bottom of the deployment order, and then so she soaks a sleep staff.
Oh, so then you don't have to have a unit you care about get slept. That's actually good utility.
Yeah, 1 out of 3 uses. I mean, they'll still sleep Cecilia and, your third unit you care about, but I mean, because of being force deployed, she has at least that level of niche utility. People can bring up, if you 2020 her, she has the highest theoretical damage in the game with her good support pool.
Yeah,
high
and
magic
Apocalypse.
Cap and Apocalypse.
Yeah, Apocalypse
and
boosting the
it's like,
magic.
that doesn't matter. This is FE6. That doesn't matter.
And she also gets staff utility if you get her to promotion, and people will bring that up as, like, a redeeming point for her.
Doesn't she get, like, E-rank staves, though?
She gets E-rank staves, and I think she starts at level 1. I'm not looking it up, because they're bad units. So
yeah, not worth it.
It's bad units, so it'll be a bad tier list. So I'm not checking my facts, but I think you have to grind her 10 levels to promote her to get E-rank staffs. Yeah. And like at that point in the game, you have so many staffers. I don't really give her credit. Like, I don't give her credit for being the 10th staffer you get.
No, exactly. I'm tempted to put her in fun meme tier, but I think she really does belong in worst of the worst because there are so many other better memes here.
I want to put her in worst of the worst because I don't think that missing 60% over and over and over again is fun.
True. Also, apologies. I have a little bit of allergies, and so if I've been muting my mic whenever I sniff, but if I accidentally miss one of those, my bad.
That's okay. Like I said, this is a bad unit tier list, so if it becomes a bad tier list, that's just part of the charm. We're in character as bad units.
Yeah, exactly.
I believe this is Gray. I asked one of my friends if there are any bad units in FE2, and he said Gray is... So if this is the wrong villager, then I'm
pretty
sorry
sure
about that.
Is Gray. Because I think Tobin has, like, the watermelon hair. Or is it Gray that has watermelon hair? Maybe it's... I don't know. Either way. We're talking about Gray, right? FE2 Gray?
Yes. If this is not the correct portrait, leave me a dislike and hate speech in the comments. But I have been told, and I haven't played anything beyond Chapter 2 of Gaiden. I'm working my way through it. But I've been told that Gray is the worst unit in Gaiden because he has, like, worse speed and strength than the other villagers and doesn't even have a good spell list to make up for it. He died very early on in my Chapter 1, and I was playing it in VC, and my friend said just leave him dead, so I did.
Yeah. I mean, you can always just resurrect him on the other side or something.
True. I can have him go to Celica's army.
I have a fun story about Gray. I think that Gray is probably outclassed, but still fine. Yeah, he's weaker than the other villagers. He can promote right away, though. You don't need to feed him. And because of the way that the promotion system works, he gets class bases and then is fine. If you put him as a mercenary, he's fine. I guess technically anything you put him as, he's fine in. Mage he's probably the worst mage out of the villagers outside of Atlas. My funny story about Gray is that I made him in a Let's Play that I did, old Let's Play before SOV came out. I made him a Cavalier. He died in the 3 Paladin chapter in Act 3, and then I rezzed him over into Celica's map, and then he just got stuck in deserts and swamps and couldn't contribute anything else, and I think he died again to like a Draco Knight, or a Draco Zombie.
But I thought sending your Celica villager Cavalier was optimal because Celica doesn't have any Cavaliers, and you need one of every class, or else the Gatekeeper won't let you into Duma Tower.
Sounds about right. I mean, that's why they gave you Conrad and Echoes, right?
Oh no, this is about bad units, not bad characters.
No, it's fine. Okay, yeah, I think that he gets a little bit of a bad rep. He's not the best unit in Echoes, but he's honestly fine. So
outclassed, but still fine. I mean, in a game where you get class bases, I think that's probably the lowest that any unit can be. Spoilers for any Echoes and Three Houses units who are on here. Setsuna. So this is, just to clarify, because I know the portraits are the same in Fates games and in FE11 and 12. This is FE12 Bantu specifically. I don't think he's worst of the worst in FE11, but he's still pretty bad. But I didn't want to have 2 of the same portrait on the tier list. This is specifically Birthright Setsuna, but I think that she's also probably bad in Revelations. I've just never tried using her.
I mean, Revelations, she's probably even worse because she joins in, if I remember right, the Lava Field chapter.
Yes.
And she's underleveled there. But granted, that's also Revelations, and like half your army is like joins horribly underleveled, and the other half of your army joins like ready to kill things out of the box. And so the game really says, hey, we gave you all the characters, here are the ones that are actually worth using.
Unit balance in Revelations is so garbage.
What is unit balance in Revelations? I don't know.
I will say this, and I haven't used her in Rev, but I suspect that she would be better in Revelations than in Birthright. And even though she joins later with basically the same stats, and that's because she has access to bows. Because a big thing that holds back the bow units in Birthright is they are stuck with Yumis, and Yumis are horrible. I would much rather
have a nice
have
resistance bonus. It doesn't really matter, and they'd rather have strength, but.
Well, but aren't the Yumis like less accurate and less powerful? I know they're less accurate. I don't remember if they're actually less powerful, but either way,
I don't remember the specifics. They're not good. The only Yumi worth using is the Fujin Yumi, and spoiler alert, she can't use it. I think I would put her probably in greatly outclassed some utility. I used her in a Birthright run that I did. At least tried to use her. I eventually benched her because I just got so many better units, but she's fine, but fine at best, and if you don't keep feeding her, she easily falls off. Like, she'll still do her job, but because Birthright gives you so many units that are just so much better, she really is just there for like 2 chapters to shoot down a couple of flying enemies before you get Takumi, and to do some helpful chip damage stuff against, actually I don't even think you fight ninjas, because you fight ninjas, but that's the chapter you get Takumi on, and so Takumi has the weapon triangle effectiveness. Yeah, she has some utility, but I don't think that she's the worst unit, but she's not really even a meme, she just kind of is like mediocre.
It also hurts her in Birthright in particular that it's so route heavy, because at least, if we're talking about Birthright versus Rev, at least Rev has some non-route objectives that she can contribute towards. Being an archer or any bow-locked unit in a route map is just hell on earth, because you don't have 1-2 range without the Shining Bow. So, yeah, I think you're probably right that greatly outclassed, but some utility, because, like you said, flyer effectiveness for at least 1 or 2 chapters. And no unit in Birthright is truly terrible just because of how easy that game is to solo if you, like, or not even solo, but just how easy that game is to power level a unit with. But I think Setsuna is probably one of the ones who struggles the most to do so.
Yeah, definitely not unusable, but still just takes extra effort to get something that you're not really happy with at the end of the day.
So this is, I believe, the most recent translation calls him Roberto. But he's the bow-mounted level 1 unit in Thracia.
Weren't there 2, or is he level 1 and the other one's level 3?
He's level 1, and the other one is level 10. So if you want to use
10?
a bow knight...
Oh wait, yeah, because of Selfina.
Yeah, so it's him and Selfina. If you want to use a bow knight, just throw a Master Seal on Selfina. He's one of, like, 4 training projects who join in like, a 3-chapter span, because you get, like, the first knight guy, then you get the Christmas Cavaliers, and then you get him, like, all in a row with each other. I think he joins at the same time as the Christmas Cavaliers, but then, like, in the chapter before that, you get another training project Cavalier, and it's like, if you want to train someone you're flush with options, the level 1 Bow Knight feels like the worst option of them, which is why I threw him on here.
Yeah, you get Callian, who is a true Cavalier, which the game has very few of. Then you get Kane and Alva, who are the, like, sword... I think it's a sword knight and a lance knight, or they might actually be Cavaliers either. I don't know. And then you get, him as a bow knight and Selfina as an actually decent bow knight. In my head, I call it, like, the anti-Wolf Guard, because they all... maybe it is just the Wolf Guard. They all suck really bad, except for one, and that's Selfina, who's the leader. Is similar to Harden, who's the leader of the Wolf Guard. Like, Callian's a pretty solid project for you to put into, but I think that Alva is just... I don't know. The only utility that I found for him is on chapter... Is it 19? Where you have to, do the big escape. Is I didn't want to leave units behind, and so I just deployed only mounted units and just ran north. And so he was a mounted unit for that chapter, and that's about it.
I guess theoretically, bow access means he can shoot down wyverns, but, like, on the flip side, bow access means he can't capture units.
Bow access, but E-rank bows and level 1 bases. What wyverns are you shooting down with? What is it, 6 might and an iron bow?
It's also notable, he is the only one of your growth units who can't use the Paragon Sword, so even if you scroll stacked him, he's going to be growing slower than the other 3 would. Like, obviously his growth rates would be just as good as the other ones. I mean, they're probably not identical, but once you throw all the scrolls on someone, growth rates don't matter. They're getting stats. Which is kind of the awkward situation to be in as a growth unit in Thracia, of, like, you could be a unit who inherently has good growths, or you could be a unit with good bases and just hold all the scrolls.
Yeah, all the scrolls make fixing units a lot easier. Caps of 20 also make, in theory, bad units less bad, because you can just get them up stat-wise. But being mounted actually is not great in Thracia, because there are so many indoor chapters, and once he loses his mount, he also loses more stats, and so he's even worse. And so the fact that he doesn't have any sort of other utility to make up for it, like, he's not like Ronan, who has 3 movement stars. He doesn't have, really anything that's stand out or unique about him. I wouldn't say he's, like, the absolute worst unit in Thracia, but in this list, I think he's definitely worth putting in worst of the worst, because I don't even think he's a fun meme. He just kind of gets nothing done.
I am going to defer to your judgment there, then, because I haven't used him enough. I need to play Thracia
I haven't
some more.
either, but I've only played Thracia once all the way through. I didn't warp skip any chapters, though I probably should have.
Oh,
No, wait, I warp skipped the dancer chapter because screw that chapter.
they're peeking through. The units are peeking through. I think some people are going to be mad that this person's not on the list, but that's a conversation for another time.
No, I think that over time, maybe some individuals would, but I think that over time people have come around to Vander.
Let me just very quickly fix my layout. Oh, that's the wrong
Yeah,
thing.
I have no idea what your layout looks like because what you've shared with me on screen, you have the entirety of the engaged cast below the actual tier list.
We will be right back while I'm fixing my layout. All right, so we're back, and hey, it's another FE6 unit. Like I said, if you like FE6, this is the tier list for you. Volt is in a
FE6.
weird... Volt or Walt, I don't know how you pronounce it, but he's in a weird situation. Because he joins in Chapter 1 as an archer, and I unironically think he's actually useful in the early chapters of hard mode, because being able to do chip damage without being able to do chip damage without taking retaliation when you have to gang up on units with 2 or 3 of your units is super valuable, because it means, like, you know, he's not getting retaliated against. That's one less person who has to heal with a vulnerary or a staff or whatever.
Yeah. I will also say,
Oh.
not just without being retaliated against, but with accuracy, because theoretically you could use a javelin or a hand axe, but those have horrible accuracy in FE6, and bows actually have decent accuracy. Anyway, you were saying.
No, I think that's a really good point that I didn't think of. It's like bows and the fire tomes are the only ways to generally reliably get really high hit on enemies. I don't think you'll hit 100. I love the fire tome so much. But yeah,
but he's putting up like mid to high 80s when everyone else is struggling in like 60s.
And you might even see 60s at one range with some units for like the axe units and stuff.
Yeah.
But he's also not worth investing in. Like, you're not feeding him kills. It's one of those... You actually released a video very recently, which, if y'all haven't seen it, check out. It's, what is the title of it? It's about discovering the good of your army versus the good of the unit.
Yeah, something like that. Build to the army versus build to the unit. So, generally that I was talking about, like, you know, units that can reclass and do other stuff. I think for this... is like, yeah, you could invest a lot into Walt and make him into a pretty solid sniper, but FE6, really at its core, is a game about swapping out your army as they become less useful, because you just get better units. Kind of like Engage, and kind of like Radiant Dawn in a similar way. So I think that he serves his purpose. I think that if you want an extra archer for Chapter 7, he can fill that role, though by then you have both Dorothy, not Dorothea, and Sue, who are also archers, and you don't necessarily need all 3 of them. So he's usable for the early game, but I think that anything beyond that, he's not really doing much. So yeah, greatly outclassed, but some utility is where I would put him. Debating fun meme tier, but I don't even necessarily think he's that much of a meme.
I think if you want to send him into a sniper, that's a meme. But if you are just using him, as you say, for a couple of chapters before swapping him out for someone better, you know, be that Dorothy, or be that Sue, or be that Shin, or whoever.
Yeah.
I think he's actually has some utility.
Putting him into a sniper, when do you even get Orion's bolts in this game? I forget. FE6 has such a lack of promotion items.
You get more Orion's bolts in FE6 than you do in FE8, at least.
FE8, you only have 1 archer.
I believe the first Orion's bolt is in Chapter 10, and you get 2 of them. I might be wrong about that. I know that there's a promotion item you get 2 of in Chapter 10. It might be Elysian Whips. But yeah, I know you get your first
Elysian
whip.
Whips early, and you get Orion's bolts early, and you get 1 Knight's Crest early, and the second one isn't until like Chapter 16 or something.
You get a Hero's Crest pretty early as well, and then the second one isn't until, like... God, it's pretty... I think that's also Chapter 16.
And I remember if you want more than 2 Knight's Crest, you either have to buy them from a secret shop or steal them from like the final boss.
Or the ballista that you warp a thief into. FE6 is a really wacky game. If you haven't played
I,
it,
I,
you
I
absolutely
love
should.
it, but it is definitely there are a lot of decisions that make a lot of sense and a lot of decisions that do not.
Speaking of people associated with decisions that don't make sense, let's talk about the weird availability of Vika. Because this is the first unit that I've put on the tier list with the express intention, unless you can convince me otherwise, of putting into not actually bad. I see her thrown
Really?
around. I see Vika thrown around as a terrible unit, horrible unit, worst unit in the game, so often. I made a poll recently for my community, which of these units is the worst, and one of the options was, comment if it's someone who's not on here, comment, and I got several comments saying Vika is the worst. And I think she's actually really good. And the reason for that is she is the only flyer in the Part 1 swamp map you get. And yes, that's one map. She's available in that. She's available in the map prior to that and in Endgame. So 3 maps of Part 1 she's available. But she is extremely useful in one of them and decently useful in the other 2. And for a Radiant Dawn unit, that's actually above a good portion of the cast. There are units, like we said with Fiona, who struggle to perform for any chapters. I think that the fact that she is a decent combat unit and the only flyer you have in a swamp map means that at the very least she should not be in contention for bad unit. Yeah, when she comes back, she's got terrible stats, and you're never gonna, even if you train her in Part 1, she's never going to contribute, or she's never going to like keep up with your Part 4 units because availability is so weird in that. But like, you could say the same for a lot of other units in Radiant Dawn. Like, Radiant Dawn Lucia is extremely good in a couple of maps of Part 2, and then she comes back in Part 4 super underleveled.
Yeah.
And no one says she's a bad unit, because she's useful for a point in the game, and then, much like in FE6 and Engage, you drop them and replace them with better units. I really like
fair.
using her in, like, otherwise, especially if you're trying to save all of the villagers for the bonus experience, it's kind of hard to do so, because the enemies have flyers in that map, and if you didn't use Vika, like, how are you fighting them? Are you...
Yeah, Vika is definitely required for the swamp map. I will give you that. And she's force deployed, and you have her. She struggles in combat even in Act 1. She's not really one-rounding anything, and she often even fails to two-round certain targets that you want her to kill, like the Wyvern Riders in that map, at least on hard difficulty. She's not the only unit in Act 1 who struggles with combat, especially if they're underleveled Dawn Brigade units. But she's the only unit in Tormod's squad who struggles with combat, which is why a lot of people immediately look at her and go, wow, she stands right next to Tormod and Morim, and then, what's she doing? She's just kind of chipping someone. Flyer utility is definitely useful, and at least Radiant Dawn gave Flying Lagoo's Canto.
Yes.
So she has that unique distinction of Canto plus Shove. Canto, Shove, Flying. She has some utility. She has some niche on that map, and a little bit on the jail map as well. With like the whole up-down cliffs and whatnot, being able to easily block stuff. I don't think that she's really that useful combat-wise, even in Act 1. But I will say for the swamp map, for the utility she has, I don't feel like I can honestly put her in not actually bad, but I don't necessarily know.
Do we want to compromise and put her in outclass then? Because because she can rescue drop people in Part 1 as well. Like, she can rescue drop the villagers. That's how I usually save them, is I have her bring them all to the center island and then have, like, Tormod squad. Well, I guess she's part of Tormod squad, but, like, the combat-oriented part, Tormod Morim, protect them. And Nyla and Volug can protect them as well.
Yeah, as a support unit, she definitely fills a role that... she's definitely you have to think about to use well, and she if you think about her as a support unit, like flying support, rescue support, then yeah, I would say that she's pretty good in that. But because she has no combat utility in a game that really encourages all your units to have combat utility, it does bring up that point. But yeah, when she's transformed, she does have enough build, I think, to rescue villagers. While she's rescuing them, she gets slowed down, but she's still not in range, like at risk of getting one-rounded. Uh, so yeah, I think that having one map of good utility means that she, at worst, is in outclass but still fine TBH. Um, I don't think we can justify putting her in not actually bad, but we'll get to that when we actually put some units in that tier.
I see. This is why I brought you on, though, because what is a good two-person tier list without some amount of disagreement? In spirit, I have Vika and not actually bad, but I'm going to be a good host. I'm going to, in the spirit of compromise, put her at the very top of outclass, but still fine, TBH.
Shouldn't we put her at the bottom of outclass, but still fine?
I guess that's the bottom. This tier list being backwards is already breaking my brain.
Yeah. And we may or may not move her down to not actually bad based on who else we end up putting in that tier.
Yeah.
I have some thoughts on some units that I think deserve to be there that some people are going to shout me down for, but we'll talk about them. We'll talk about them.
Well, I've got another controversial Tellius opinion. Do you want to talk about... This is Path of Radiance, Lucia, just because I know the portraits kind of blend together. Do you want to talk about her first, so then I can dive in with my actually about her? Because I have thoughts.
You can do your actually. I haven't really used Lucia in Path of Radiance. I've played that game through a couple times. I've used her as like filler in Clash. She's okay-ish. She holds a sword. She gets... I mean, people are always going to compare her to like Stefan, which... I mean, very few units really hold up to that comparison. Stefan is kind of the Kagetsu of Path of Radiance. In a lot of ways. I think that she's... If she was in a game where you didn't have units like Stefan or like even Largo who join and have really solid bases and can do a lot of stuff out of the box, I think she would be a fine, later game filler unit. But because she is in a game that she has a lot of direct comparisons to units that join around her and kind of outclass her in that way, it does make her look worse. I don't think she's terrible, but I think she's definitely outclassed in a lot of ways.
I think she's the worst unit in Path of Radiance, and I don't even think it's close. And that's not just because I'm a massive Rolf fangirl. So here's the deal, right? Because, the units who pale in comparison to all of their peers at the join time, it's Lucia, Rolf, and Shannon when you recruit him a second time, right? All three of them have stats that are way worse than the other units. They don't have a mount, and like with Path of Radiance Kanto, not having a mount is a huge deal. They don't have a mount. They either have swords or bows, which are like the bad units, or the bad weapons, and no way to get another weapon type as well, even upon promotion. Or I guess that only applies to Rolf, but they're locked to one weapon.
Here I was thinking you were going to say, "Oh, Lucia is secretly good, secret S tier."
No.
I just had you pegged way wrong.
She's secret F tier. She pales in comparison statistically to... You mentioned Stefan, who... he's a bit of a secret character, but I think, even ignoring the direct comparison of, like, foot units, there are horse units with better combat than her. Like, filler horse units like Makalov. If you train Makalov, he'll turn out better than her at the time she joins. Rolf, at the very least, joins so early on that you don't mind a unit being so statistically behind the rest of your army. Like, if you want to meme around with Rolf, you're still in the early game. It's easier to train an early game bad unit than a late game bad unit. Lucia joins very shortly before endgame. She joins in Battle Reunion. So you have the Mountain Climbing Chapter, you have Clash, you have Twisted Tower, and then you have Repatriation? I might be forgetting one, but I think those are the only
Twisted
chapters.
Tower, is that the one where you have the one?
Oh, Moment of Fate.
Refight. Yeah, you have the refight against the Black Knights.
Yeah. So she joins in Battle Reunion, she's forced deployed there, and she struggles to fight units even on that map. And then you have the mountain climbing map, and that map really cuts your deployment slots.
That map also cuts all your movement as well. It's a really terrible map.
And it's a route map, so like being locked to one range on a route map is not really where you want to be. After that, you have Clash. She's like, you can deploy her in Clash just because you have so many deployment slots, but she's not doing much on that map if you do deploy her. And that's more a symptom of like, you have a bajillion deployment slots on that map.
She
After
might do
Clash,
chip damage against one paladin, yeah.
or she might eat a siege. Honestly, I think her best utility is eating a siege tome and dying, so that there's one less siege tome to deal with on that map.
Not wrong.
Then after that, you have Moment of Fate, Twisted Tower, and Endgame. And like, if she's getting a deployment slot in any of those, I don't know what's wrong with you.
Yeah, like if you're wanting to use meme sword units, you're using Mia. If you're wanting to use sword units that can actually grow into something, you're using Zahark. If you're wanting to use a good swordmaster, you're using Stefan. You're only using Lucia if you think she's hot. That's basically it.
I have a friend who did a solo with Mia, and then they found that the solo with Mia was too easy, so they reclassed it into a secret solo with Lucia when Lucia joined. And then they quit because they hated using Lucia so badly. So
sounds about right.
If that doesn't convince you that she belongs here, I'm not sure what will.
Yeah, and like I said, worst of the worst, that does fit. Like I said, I've done a number of runs of Path of Radiance. I literally have only ever deployed Lucia as filler on Clash, and I've never even considered deploying her outside of that, so I think that probably tells you all you need to know. I've used Mia as a meme. I've leveled Rolf seriously as a kid playing the game, thinking he was good. I made him a 20/20 sniper.
Oh my god,
and
me
thought
too!
He was so good,
Me too!
And then it's just... I think... I followed this Nintendo Power Strategy guide, I think, for it or something, and it told me to do it. Yeah, no. The Rolf... At least the Rolf bow triangle attack is a fun meme. I mean, we could talk about Rolf right now.
Yeah, let's skip ahead and talk about Rolf, because we're sharing Rolf memories.
Skip around. What's your tier list? We can talk in the order.
What's your Rolf memory?
Rolf memory is that... Okay, so Rolf bow is actually pretty good. It actually is a solid weapon, to be honest.
And unlike the hatchet, it's actually locked to him, too. Which is like... Yeah. So it actually counts for him, which is baller.
Yeah, definitely. Helps him train his weapon experience, because I think it gives him, like, as much as a steal. It's 2 per shot instead of 1, I think. But it also is, like, stronger and more accurate. He's honestly not... Like, he's an archer in Path of Radiance. It's double effectiveness, so he can't one-shot birds on the boat unless you pour your bonus experience into him. My Rolf memories are basically doing just that. Not necessarily with the bonus experience, but babying him, feeding him kills, giving Oscar bows and promoting Boyd, and then using the triangle shot, giving him an occult scroll because Deadeye, and just having him do, jumping backflips to put enemies to sleep because he doesn't actually kill them even with a Deadeye proc.
You know what makes me very sad about Deadeye?
What?
What if... Because Deadeye can boost your accuracy over 100%. What if Gamble was only 5 capacity, so you could run Gamble and Deadeye together, and you could activate Gamble Deadeye strats for a crit Rolf?
I would have loved that. That would have been amazing. I fully think Rolf is fun meme tier.
Oh,
because,
absolutely.
Yes, he's bad, but trainable. Like you said with Lucia, he's bad but trainable, and there's just a level of joy that you have when you're training a bad archer that you know is bad, that still manages to get to the point where he joins in with worse stats than like anyone else outside of Mist, but you can turn him into someone who doesn't have fantastic stats, but can still like cap his speed and skill.
I would argue that Path of Radiance, even on hard mode, is an easy enough game that you can train him without bonus experience as well. Because, whether or not we count bonus experience into it is a little bit like... I've heard some people compare it to the Tower of Volney. I'm not fully on board that comparison, because it is limited and, comes from objectives. But I can understand, like, the idea of wanting to ban bonus experience from some runs because you think it makes the game too easy. Like, it's definitely a valid argument. It's not one that I subscribe to, but I can understand people being like, oh, well, you're hyperinflating them because of bonus experience. I think you can train him even without bonus experience. Like, he joins at a point in the game when enemies don't usually have 1-2 range, so like a chip here, a kill there, that's fine.
Yeah, I he's usable filler at worst. I think, yeah, fun meme tier, because even afterwards, because of the power and accuracy of bows, it's we always talk about, oh yeah, archers are bad because no one range. But that said, a bad archer is easier to train than a bad sword unit because the archer can stay safe.
True. And it's not like there's not many route maps in Path of Radiance, so the fact that he can't counter enemies, like, I think that archers are a lot better in games without too many route maps because the lack of an enemy phase doesn't hurt as much. Like, you're still contributing to an objective if you're shooting people on player phase.
Yeah. Most Path of Radiance maps have not necessarily super interesting objectives, but most of them aren't just route, and so you have a lot of variety of objectives where an archer can actually do some useful things. And people meme on, oh, his stats are so low and whatnot. I think he actually joins with similar stats to Astrid, but like 4 chapters earlier.
No Paragon, though.
No Paragon, and yes, he's an archer, not a bow knight. But that does mean he can use a longbow.
Wait,
for 3 range.
I forgot that they can't use longbows.
Longbows are archer sniper locked.
Or, okay, what about this? He could use the double bow, aka, according to the code, the longbow. It's 4 range. It's called, internally in the code of Path of Radiance. Longbow? Yeah, it's called longbow in Path of Radiance's internal code.
Yeah.
I mean,
4 range, same might as a longbow. Like 7 might. It's like 7 might, 4 range.
It got such a glow up in Radiant Dawn, turning it into a 1-2 range weapon so it's actually useful.
Yeah, so good.
But I think that we can uncontroversially put this unit in not actually bad, because as we all know, my level 20 Amelia got capped defense, as a general, of course, because I didn't send her into Paladin like a heathen.
No, Amelia is a fun meme.
Oh, absolutely.
Amelia is a fun meme. She is the funnest meme. You know what the best meme for Amelia is? Super Recruit.
Oh, doesn't that give her, like, Berserker crit?
Yeah, it gives her plus 15% crit, but with lances, and so she basically turns into a swordmaster with worse caps.
Baller.
She's like, all her speed and like a 24 or 25 speed cap, when Swordmaster has like 30. Like, I think it's legitimately lower caps than Paladin in like almost everything.
Does she gain movement upon reclassing to Super Trainee?
She does. When reclassing to Recruit and then Recruit a 3rd time, she does gain movement, so she will have 6 movement when fully promoted.
That's good, because I thought she still had 4 move, and that would be awful. So technically...
She looks like she has 4 move, but she doesn't.
She gains movement upon going to Super Trainee, but does not gain movement upon going to Armor Knight. I think Super Trainee might actually just be better then.
I forget what the option is if you promote her into Secret Recruit. I forget what the other option is for promotion if you're going for full Super Recruit versus what the second option is on that. Like, for instance, with Ross, you either get Super Trainee or you get Warrior. I think that would mean that your Great Knight is a thing, but I think it is Paladin is the other class that you have to choose from on that role. But either way, Amelia is technically best Cavalier into Paladin, but if you haven't at least tried, Super Recruit Amelia, it's not good, but it is fun, especially with like a Killer Lance and just build your own. I think she has a thunder affinity too, so she can get crit from supports. So it's basically build your own 70% crit build.
If only she could inherit Wrath from Emblem Ike.
Oh, I know, right?
So, I put this unit on here. This is another one that I think, at the very least, falls into outclassed, but probably not actually bad. This is Est from Fire Emblem 1. I hear it talked about very often that Est in FE1 is really bad and not even an Est unit because of the way the experience formula works in FE1. And while it's true that, you don't get more experience... I mean, you just made a video on the experience formula in older FE games. So do you want to recap how that works for anyone who hasn't seen that? And also go check
Fire
out that video?
Emblem 1... Yeah, go check out the video. Link maybe not in the description, but it will be one of the more recent videos that I've made. Fire Emblem 1, basically the experience system goes, every unit has an EXP value on your units, that's the EXP they have up to next promotion, but on enemies, that's the EXP value of getting the kill, and if you don't get the kill, then you get experience equal to the damage that you dealt, up to a maximum of 20 per session of combat. So, if, say, Est, who joins in with a Rider's Bane, hits a Cavalier, because Rider's Banes aren't effective against Paladins in FE1, for whatever reason, and
Wait,
deals...
seriously?
Yeah, no.
I didn't know that. What?
Rider's Bane is an Iron Lance that's heavier and has effective damage against only Cavaliers, not Paladins. And not Horsemen, either.
That's so horrible. That's horrible.
I don't know. It is... The Night Killer Lance... It only affects horse knights, yeah. So if she does 18 damage to a Cavalier when she joins, and doesn't kill the Cavalier, and somehow doesn't die on retaliation, then she'll get 18 experience. Being a flyer, and being in a game where you have a lot of generous deployment slot, not a lot, but the units that she's competing against aren't so much better than her that, she's immediately outclassed. And being a flyer, especially in some of the later maps of FE1, you want flyers. Especially because FE1, even when they throw in ballistas aren't 3 to 10 range, they're 2 range and awful.
Yeah, they're just armored archers. They're bow armors, basically.
Yeah, bow armors, but they're worse because they have 4 move. Archers have the same move as armor knights at 5. Yeah, her stats are decent for her level. Her level is low, and that makes it hard to get her to promotion, but...
Well, but,
You're not fighting over Elysian Whips, though, because you get enough Elysian Whips for every flyer in your army, which can't be said of any other unit type.
Well, don't you not get Elysian Whips until the Tiki chapter anyway?
You get one before that. You get one, I think... it's not in Nordham Market. I think it's just you get one in the chapter after Nordham Market, coming back to Arcanea Castle. I think it's there.
I thought the first Elysian Whip was in the Tiki chapter, because the meme is this is where Sita promotes. But that might be FE3.
True.
That might be FE3, though.
They might have changed in FE3. I don't fully remember. It's been a little while since I've played through FE1 fully. But I do know that you get a good number of Elysian Whips in that game, actually.
And even unpromoted,
you get them late. Yeah.
Even unpromoted, being a game that caps at 20, she's gonna still have stats comparable to the promoted flyers if you train her to level 20, just because of the way caps work.
And people who don't know anything about FE1 look at it and go, "Oh, her growths look bad." Newsflash: FE1, nobody's growths look good.
Yeah, she has the highest growths.
Unless you're looking at Tiki or Katria.
Well, doesn't Est have the highest growths in the game? Isn't that?
I don't think so. I would need to look this up. Oifibot, tell me the truth, Oifi.
Wait, somebody...
I can't use Oifi because I'm on Discord right now.
Somebody in the comments will fact check us. So for engagement, we're going to say... For engagement, I'm going to posit that she has the highest growth in the game, and you can fact check me in the comments if I'm wrong. Speaking of someone who doesn't have the highest growth in the game...
Oh, heck, her growth rates, they're not the highest, but they are solid. 55% strength, 55% speed, 60% skill.
That's baller.
Yeah, for this game, insane.
That's actually baller. Like,
wait, actually no, wait, that's Shadow Dragon DS. Okay, Gaiden. Yeah, no, in FE1, she might actually 70 skill, 70 strength, 70 speed, 70 luck, 60 weapon level.
and this is a game where most units would be lucky to have a single stat growth that goes over 50.
Yeah,
Like,
plus then Draco Knight promotion bonuses, absolutely insane. She's level 5, not level 3. Yeah, no, she's a perfectly usable unit. She just gets a bad rep because other units exist that are already trained, presumably, at that point. But she only joins, like, one chapter after Katria and Pala. One, maybe two.
I think
Not even that
also,
late.
like, most Ests in modern Fire Emblem, well, I mean, the only Est I can think of in recent years is Rosado, but most Ests in, like, GBA and Tellius era Fire Emblem are significantly worse than Est herself is. It's kind of weird. Like, the archetype got worse over time, as opposed to, like, Jagan, where the archetype got a lot better over time.
Yeah, Est gets a bad rep. I think that Est herself is actually a good unit in most of her appearances, and you can fight me on that. Maybe the only one is, like, FE12 Est is not that great because she joins so late, but other than that, she's actually a really solid unit in pretty much every other game she's in.
Oh, but have you not considered in FE12 you can grind to infinite money with Zane in the arena and then spend that money in the battlegrounds training Est? Big brain.
Big brain indeed. Anyway, let's get to another big brain unit because we've been at this for an hour already.
Oh no. So Bunei, I don't think there's too much to dwell on. I don't like this unit. I think he's bad. I think he might be the worst unit in Engage, and like, so he joins at a time where if you wanted a physical unit to be a Great Knight, you could promote Jade or Louis. They would be around the same status as him, and even if they're both dead, you can just reclass someone because you have second seals available pretty readily at that point. There's 6 available at that point, which isn't infinite, but it's like, it's enough that if you want a Great Knight, you can just send someone into Great Knight. But also, Great Knight's not a great class at that point in the game. And you got, like, no deployment slots. Like, am I failing to see something? Because I don't think Bunei is, like, good at anything.
There's apparently a niche where if you reclass him to warrior in 0% growths, he has, like, I forget if it's a breakpoint or if it is just, like, the highest strength for a warrior that you can get in 0% growths at that time. But people don't but we're not tiering units based on 0% growths, we're tiering them based on the actual game. So Bunei has arguable niche at best. I don't think he's really a good unit. He's not even a memorable unit. He joins as a Great Knight and he gets, like, 2-rounded by most enemies in his joining chapter, and then you never deploy him again because you're constantly getting more and more and more units, and the soul mark limits you to, like, 7 units deployment. He would be a fine filler unit in other games, but because he joins in the middle of the unit join flood and gets immediately outclassed. It's like, yeah, you could, reclass him to a warrior, or you could wait 1 chapter and reclass Panette to a warrior.
And reclassing, the existence of reclassing, I think, hurts him as well, because anyone can be, like, if your team needs a Great Knight, just send someone with better personal stats into Great Knight.
Yeah, his personal stats are quite low, just to make up for the fact that Great Knight's class stats are quite high.
Like, I would not be surprised if Vander looks similar to him in Great Knight. I haven't checked on it, and he's probably better, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's, like, closer than you think.
Yeah, he has the opposite problem of Pandreo, the other retainer of Fogado, where Pandreo's personal bases are quite high to make up for the fact that High Priest's class bases are so low. So he has the opposite problem in the worst way. Bad unit.
Speaking of people with problems, Power of Pursuit. Is there any way Arden goes anywhere other than fun meme tier?
I don't think so. So when I played FE4, he said, they always talked about, hey, you need to guard the castle. And so I legitimately left him at the castle in chapter 1. or in prologue, and then I was like, hold on, wait, no one's coming to fight, and so I tried to throw him into into combat, and he didn't make it before everyone was dead. So, and that was the story of Arden in Genealogy in my first playthrough.
I love it. I think I tried using him. My first playthrough was blind, so I didn't know about the pursuit ring. I think I tried using him, and then he died, and I hadn't saved in a couple of turns, so I just kept playing.
Yeah, no worries. If I hadn't looked up the pursuit ring, I never would have even fielded him.
We got another green-haired meme armor knight. I'm probably biased, but I'm going to propose that Bors ends up in greatly outclassed but some utility, and the reason for this is he joins super early. Similarly to Walt, you need all hands on deck. Like, yeah, you send him to the village in Chapter 1, but Chapter 2 is where things hit the fan, and, like, yes, he gets one-rounded by some enemies in Chapter 2 despite being the armor knight, but, like, he can rescue drop Marcus onto the fort because of his deployment position. I'm counting that as utility for him, and he can finish off enemies that you need finished off. And not every enemy one-rounds him either, which, is good. It's a good utility that he can have. I think that being available during those, I think it's the first 5 chapters where you kind of just want all hands on deck.
And he's force deployed anyway.
Yes. I don't think anyone in that squad can go any higher or lower than greatly outclass some utility. Simply because on hard mode, you really do want everyone to contribute. And there's some stinkers in that squad, and I think Bors is probably the worst of them, but he's still among them. And I think that pushes him ahead.
Yeah, he suffers from FE6's lack of Night Crests. He suffers a lot from that.
Oh, yes.
But if you're using the Armor Knight triangle attack, he is the best of the 3 Armor Knights, so...
I had to actually... So I used the Armor Knight triangle attack to kill Idun, and I had to have Barth get the finishing blow because Bors was the only one who could survive a counterattack, and none of them could hit her... Like, none of them could one-shot her. So Bors chipped because he could survive the counterattack, and then Barth killed because you don't get the triangle attack if all 3 of them aren't alive.
Yeah, Bors chipped so Barth could thrive.
Ubello. Ubello starts as a mage and has a negative magic base. And he also has E-rank
clan?
Well, so he doesn't even have good strength, though, is the thing. Like, you reclass him into a physical unit, and he's still not good. He's got, like, zeros in basically everything, and -3 magic base. The only benefit he has over any other unit reclassed into a mage is, like, 20 tome experience. He's still at E-rank tomes, he's just slightly closer to D-rank. He's bad.
I tried to use him in my one run of FE12. I also tried to use him in FE3, and I don't think that lasted very long. I tried to use him in FE12. I was playing on Maniac, so not Lunatic, but still bad. He did not last very long on my army. He is not a good unit, and he doesn't have much going for him. The best thing he gives your army is a mage slot so someone else can be a mage.
True. You do get the slots, although I'm fairly certain you still get the slot if he dies.
You keep them if he dies, yes. And because he joins as a blue unit, you always have that just after that chapter, so
that's kind of like the Sophia guiding ring in my mind. But that is something he technically gives your army.
Technically, yeah, no, bad unit.
Flora has worse staff rank and stats than capturable generic maids on hard mode, let alone lunatic mode.
And she also can't join until, chapter 21 or something, and you have to have a rank 3 fire orb or something, was it?
And the only thing that differentiates her from those generics who have better stats and ranks than her is a fucking FE Heroes rank skill. Like, the weird, if you are hit with a shuriken and also are at 2 range and also equip this, and then the moon is red and you've touched your toes on Tuesday, then something will happen.
Okay, so she has a Mortal Kombat secret character recruitment skill. Okay.
Basically.
Yeah.
Have you ever used Brady? Because I've used him once.
No, I've played Awakening a grand total of two and most of a third time. Uh, I have very little interest in playing Awakening again. So tell me about Brady.
So talking about the kids in Awakening is always really weird because there's a lot of different factors, like what parents you give them and how early you do their paralog, because they all join at level 10. They don't scale, unlike Conquest or unlike Fate's kids. They don't scale. So they're kind of like Ests if you get them late enough. But I think it's pretty safe to say that no matter what you do for Brady, he's going to end up as a bad unit, because he joins
Are
us
there any
at...
good skills that Maribel can pass down to him?
Well, I don't even think skills would help him, but no, because she has access to Valkyrie, or she has access to, like, Troubadour, Cleric, and I think Mage? Just, like, magical stuff? But
Yeah,
he
so
joins
she
as
doesn't
a
have-
priest, and it's like... You don't really... So healers in Awakening are... Like, you don't need that many healers in
bad.
Awakening. And if you need healers, like, Libra and Anna are right there, and you probably don't need a third one.
Yep. If we're talking about normal and hard, then healers, like, arguably have a niche. If we're talking about lunatic, then just, like, do a broken build instead.
Even on normal and hard,
Awakening.
though... the staff formula is so harsh, and the staff experience is so harsh, that, like...
Yeah.
You use your healers for rescue staff, and anyone can use the rescue staff because it's E rank, and so you want Falcon Knights to do that. And he also has the problem of, like, what's that kid in FE4? Charlot. He's like Charlot, where, like, he joins super late, because he's from Maribel's, Paralog, which I don't think you can access until you head over to the other continent. He joins fairly late.
It's like the latest paralog you get access to, or on the map wise, it's the farthest corner of Valm, which doesn't necessarily matter too much, but it does put it back at least one chapter.
Yeah, I think you either need to, like, advance in the story to the point where you've recruited Cyree, or you might be able to link some paralogs to each other. I know the worst one to get is Pon's kid, whose name I can't remember, because
Yarn.
you have to... Yeah, Yarn. You have to go down, like, to the volcano map to get him, or else link multiple kids' paralogs. But Libra is in a similar situation, and he joins at a point where, like... So, Lissa, staff utility, definitely useful early game. Mirabelle, definitely useful early game. He joins at the point where, like, you have Sages and Falcon Knights. Like, if you're playing without broken builds, you've got Sages and Falcon Knights. I'm not sure that you need a dedicated staffer. And that's what he is, because he joins as an unpromoted priest.
Staff utility in Awakening is very poor. It literally is either just healing or rescue. Like, I don't even remember if there's a warp staff in the game.
There's not. There's Viable Rescue, which is super useful, but I'd rather be a flyer for that. And he can't become a Falcon Knight because he's a dude.
Yeah, so he suffers of, like, the worst of all worlds. He has he has at least one parent who's not going to give him any useful stats, and arguably not great access to useful skill. And then his other parent, might give him some stats and some class access, but that just means that he's a worse replacement version. He's a downgrade of that other parent should that parent die. And that's all he really is. He just kind of gets screwed out of a lot of stuff. I mean, that's just the story of his life, is that he got sent back to the past. He arrived earlier than anyone else and just got beaten up and is just now just a worthless cleric. I forget his whole backstory. It doesn't matter. He's a bad unit.
I do have a funny story about the one time I used him, though. So I was playing the second to last map, To Kill a God. It's a boss map with the mountains and stuff. You fight that chick for the second time, the Dark Flyer lady.
Aversa.
Aversa, yes. It's the second time you're fighting Aversa. So I just got the S support with him and Naui. And he was talking to Naui, and Naui was like, and he said something about, like, I'm going to die now because you're stressing me out. And she said, no, you have to promise not to make me into a widow. And he goes, okay, I promise. Turn 1 of the Aversa map, a Falcon Knight gets a crit on someone, Gale Forces, and then is able to go and kill him because of the Gale Force. And I was like, you know what? This is too funny. I know it's only turn 1, but like, this is matching up with the S support. This is now the canon ending. I'm not resetting. I lost a couple of good units in that map, but refused to reset because I wanted it to be canon, and also killing Grima is pretty trivial. You don't need good units for it. You just need Robin.
That's probably the best what's his name story you can have.
Gameplay story.
I don't remember his name.
Gameplay story integration, or
yes, but for this unit, I don't remember his name.
Oh, I also don't remember his name now. I just was saying it too. Brady. His name is Brady.
Brady,
his name
yeah.
is Brady.
That's probably the best the most enjoyment Brady has ever given anyone.
Jagan, very quickly. I hear people say Jagan's bad because you can give the Silver Lance to Sheeta and his growth rates are terrible. I think he's not actually bad. Like, Sheeta's probably a better user of the Silver Lance than him, and the Cavaliers will outclass him eventually. But it's like the Vander thing all over again. He's good in the early game.
Jagan, there are people that argue that Jagan's the best unit in the game in FE1 because stat boosters are so broken that it doesn't matter if he's never getting any stats on level up, because you can just give him a stat booster and he has paladin class bases outside of low HP. He can just, rock those all game long, and that is not untrue. I don't think he's the best unit in the game because of the way that the growths work. Your Christmas Cavs will quickly surpass him.
Yes.
But even surpassed, he's still worth fielding through at least half of the game.
And he's
if
usually,
only to just do utility stuff.
He's going to have more movement than them for a long time as well, because the first Night Crest is in the Minerva map.
Yeah, and it's
wait,
not
no,
even
that's a
one
Hero
more
Crest. That's not even Night Crest.
Yeah, no, the first Night Crest you get is after that.
It's pretty late. But either way,
either a droppable thing in Norda Market, or it's not until Arcanea Palace.
I think it's Arcanea Palace.
Yeah.
But either way, that goes to Harden anyway, because he's better than the Christmas Cavs.
It depends on your growth, what growths you got, but yeah.
But yeah, I think that Jagan's not a bad unit.
Yeah, no, not bad at all. Spawned the archetype that is beloved for some of the best units in the series to this day. Not bad unit.
Alright, I got another spicy take here. I think Revelations Nyx is either outclassed but still fine, or greatly outclassed some utility. Everyone brings up Rev Nyx as one of the worst units of all time, and I put her on that community poll as a trap. Because I don't think she's actually that bad. She joins next to Shura, and like you said, Rev is one of those games where everyone either has way worse stats or way better stats than they should at that point in the game. Yeah. And joining side by side with Shura makes her look worse. But Odin joins like 3 chapters later with worse stats than her in the same class, and nobody talks about him being the worst unit ever. Rev is just really weird about what units are good and bad.
Yeah. Nyx is outclassed, but still fine, I think, is fair for her, because, yeah, her stats are low. Her level's low. Her growths are good. She becomes... No matter what you do to her, if you leave her in either Mage or put her into Witch, she'll have enough magic to just be, a magical delete button anyway. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, and, like, if you're not a Royal in Fates, like, your stats are going to look worse than the Royals. But I still think... Or not in Fates, in Rev specifically. If you're not a Royal, your stats are going to look, like, really, really terrible next to the Royals. But I think that, like, when everyone is a bad unit, no one is.
8 out of 10 doctors agree that 90% of people's, at least first Revelations playthrough, is just every single Royal, and then, like, Mozu, Kildori, and, like, 1 or 2 other flyer units that can help you fly skip some of those awful, awful maps.
Do you have any strong opinions about Ashe?
I think Ashe is not actually bad.
Really? Do tell.
So this is I actually do have strong opinions about Ashe, because here's the thing. Ashe gets trampled over by everyone's obsession with Wyvern Lords in 3 houses. everyone is obsessed with Wyvern Lords, or everyone is obsessed with making actually bad units good because of a niche, like freaking Bernadetta uh, Vengeance build.
Wait, are you saying that Bernadette is bad?
Bernadetta is only useful with the Vengeance build. Bernadetta is not a useful unit outside of the Vengeance build.
But Vengeance is one of the strongest tools in 3 houses. Like, that's...
I'm not saying here's the thing. Bernadetta with Vengeance is exceedingly good. Bernadetta, if you're not doing the Vengeance build, has nothing. is what I'm saying. And so it's like, yes, Vengeance gives her that niche, but that's the only thing that gives her the niche.
I mean, she has
Ash,
boons in lances and bows, I believe, and those are valuable areas to have boons in.
Yeah.
And, like, in a game like
maybe
Three
it was
Houses...
just my own experience with her, because... So, Ash... Bernadetta is fine. I'm not saying that she's, like, awful, but, like, Bernadetta is fine, and then made great because of the Vengeance build. Ash, I think, is actually not bad, not nearly as bad as people say, because, okay, he doesn't have the most broken tools in the game, sure. And maybe because it's 3 houses, that means he's greatly outclassed, because this is 3 houses, and I despise the way that game just gets solved by battalion skills and stupid warp skip builds. But if you're... I don't know. I like Bow Knight Ash specifically, because he is the best user of the Deadeye build. Because Deadeye is only either on Ash or Bernadetta, and Bernadetta does not have the stats to back it up. Ash does. Ash has axes pretty good access, so he can get Deathblow really quickly. Yes, you can make him a Wyvern, you can make everyone a Wyvern, and he's pretty natural at getting there. He's still usable in that role. I don't think he's the best, but I don't think he's the worst. But Bow Knight with the Deadeye build, which is you give him plus hit from Archer, you give him one of the... I think it's Marianne's battalion that gives plus 40 hit when fully leveled up. And then you give him a bow, like a Forged Iron Bow or something, and then he actually has good hit rates at like 8 to 9 range in a spammable format. Yes, 3 houses means that the way that 3 houses is designed means that build doesn't necessarily have relevance when the meta is either enemy phase, battalion skill destroying everything, or stride warp skipping every chapter in the game. But I've used... Like, Ash struggles in the early to mid game, but by late game, if you put the effort into him, and I guess this is just my pitfall of AI invested in Ash, not because I even like the character, I think he's pretty boring as far as 3 houses characters go. But Deadeye being able to snipe out key targets, like units on siege weapons, certain flyers, mages with siege tomes, which will retaliate back against him, but he usually has enough damage to one-shot him.
Wait, siege tomes retaliate? I did not know that. That's really cool,
Yeah,
actually.
If you attack at 3 to 10 range, in 3 houses specifically, siege tomes will retaliate against you. It's kind of funny how I almost got him killed by attacking, not knowing that, and then taking the counter meteor to the face.
Because in most games, it's not the case. That's kind of funny.
Yeah, no. People say everyone writes off that build without trying it because they're like, well, if you're attacking at 8 range, you're going to be at minus 160 hit. Well, you can easily make up that with a lot of the tools that the game gives you, but people just don't do that because they want to do other stuff. And I totally understand that, so maybe I'd put him at, like, outclass, but still fine. My heart wants to put him in not actually bad.
I was going to say outclass, but still fine, TBH, because I agree with not everything you said, but a large amount of what you said in terms of, like, he is going to be a perfectly serviceable unit in your endgame. You mentioned the Deadeye build. I think he would do better as a Vantage Wrath enemy face unit. Like, he can't get Bat Wrath Bat Vantage, but he can just get the vanilla versions by going through Mercenary and Warrior. And like he'll delete a bunch
those
of
aren't
enemies.
hard classes for him to
No, they're
master
not.
either.
Doesn't he have an axe boon as well? So like he has the
Yeah,
benefit of
axe
going
boon,
into
so he
warrior.
can get brigand, and then he can get warrior pretty quickly on his way up to Bow Knight.
But like at the end of the day, Three Houses is a game where the entire cast is super powerful. I think that he is a good unit in like a vacuum, but in the merits of judging characters by the context that they exist in, he's competing for bottom 3 with 2 other units that the eagle-eyed viewers might be able to tell who I think those units are.
Yeah.
And that's not because he's a bad unit in a vacuum, right? It's a similar problem I have with, like, whenever I say a unit in Engage is bad, everyone's like, well, if you train them, they become super valuable in the endgame, and I think that's true of anyone in Three Houses and Engage, especially Three Houses.
Yeah.
That roster is cracked, and even if you're not doing, like, warp skipping every map, your roster is incredibly strong in Three Houses.
Yeah. I dare anyone to do house playthroughs, like house only playthroughs, no recruiting other units, and not tell me that Ash still has viable purpose. Like people like get Ash killed for fun in Cindered Shadows, but Ash actually in Cindered Shadows is really solid as well because that's a very limited army. Limited army game, and it is designed for him to play an important role. I don't think he has Deadeye in that.
I don't remember. I've only played 4 chapters of Cindered Shadows. I kind of didn't like the campaign.
Yeah, no worries.
But yeah, I think he's definitely I think he's a serviceable unit. And I think that the hatred for him and the other 2 units that I would argue are competing for the bottom of the roster is definitely exaggerated because like you said, killing him off for fun, it can be a funny meme to do that, but it's also he's not like Amelia.
He's a good unit who happens to not be a broken unit in a game where every unit has something that can make them broken.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's the best way to phrase it. Three Houses roster is broken, and so if you are merely good, then you're bad.
If you put someone like Ash in any other game, he becomes like easily like top 10 units in that game. But because he's in Three Houses,
On the topic of a unit who's kind of hurt by the game they're in, Carla is a fast Myrmidon unit in a game where enemy speed thresholds are not very high. Also, her
not even that fast. She joins with worse bases than Jafar in every way.
Wait, seriously?
Maybe not in every way, but in most ways, yeah. No, she sucks. She deliberately sucks so that way she doesn't one round
the warrior. What's his name?
Bartre. Yeah, she's deliberately bad so she doesn't just one round Bartre because Bartre is also bad. And so yeah, she's worse than Jafar. She's a sword master. You only have her for victory or death. And the final map.
You can go into the Gaiden. You can go into the Gaiden with all the axes. There's a Gaiden.
True.
There's a Gaiden that I think was.
Gaiden. Funny thing about that Gaiden, if you're playing on one of the Eliwood versions, then it's full of different units. But if you're playing on a Hector mode playthrough, or it might be specifically Hector hard mode, it's just full of berserkers.
I don't know.
Devil axes.
I've literally never played that map. I'm aware of the fact that it's full of berserkers in Hector hard mode because I've seen other people play it, but I've never. I do not like a lot of the Gaidens in FE7 feel like they're pointless to go to because no rewards and they're unfun maps.
Hey, at least FE7 gives you the choice whether to go to them or not if you unlock them, unlike every other game.
Yes! Can we bring that back, please?
Yeah. That way you know, because I was thrown off all the time by, I'm playing my, FCP Shadow Dragon. Oh wait, there's a Gaiden here? I didn't know. Yeah, Carla, I don't even necessarily think she's a fun meme, but she might be a fun meme just because of her recruitment is so silly, but I think she's just such a terrible unit.
Yeah, that's the question. Do we penalize her or give her credit for the recruitment? Because, like, the recruitment is incredibly funny, but it's also incredibly annoying.
I mean, the recruitment gets people to use Bartray, who is actually can be decent-ish in that game, but mostly just because that game's speed thresholds are so low.
On the merits of forcing you to use Bartray, let's put her in fun meme then. She gets credit for what Bartray does.
Sure, yeah.
This is Radiant Dawn.
Radiant Dawn, Astrid.
She has horrible availability even for Radiant Dawn, and is really not contributing in the maps that she's forced in. She can do stuff in Joffrey's charge. Being able to attack at 2 range.
Kind of. She can attack at 2 range and do 9 damage to someone. She's bad. She gets like one rounded by some units in Joffrey's charge. She's really bad. All she does for me is hang back around the yellow units and maybe get a couple kills.
Yeah, it hurts me to put her in Worst of the Worst because she's like one of my favorite units in a Path of Radiance. But she's just not good in Radiant Dawn.
She joins there. You don't get a chance to use her until if you hold out till chapter 10 in Olencia's Gambit, and then she's the worst unit in the charge there. She comes back in the one chapter where you're... Is she even in the chapter where you're trying to prevent them from burning the villages?
Yes.
Yeah, I think she is, but... Yeah, she's basically the unit that you just run around and put out the fires with.
Hey, that's utility. I'm not
that
coping.
Is utility.
You're coping. I'm not coping. You're coping.
No, it's fine. And then she joins when the rest of Joffrey's units join the Grail Mercenaries, and then immediately gets shunted to the bottom of your deployment order, never to be seen again.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, my sweet princess.
She provides Paragon that you probably end up taking off her and putting on Marcia, so you can ship that over to the Grail Mercenaries.
Yeah, the fact that Paragon is a scroll instead of locked to her, like, I could try to copium and argue
Marcia,
Paragon. Still. I could try to like copium and argue Paragon if this were like FE9, but it's not even like she gets it without having to pay.
She doesn't have to pay
skill cost.
Skill
Whoop-de-doo.
point for it, but
who cares?
But she can transfer it over because it's FE10.
Yeah. Aselio. He's basically Faval, but doesn't get access to a legendary bow, and Faval already struggles to contribute.
That's also because the U-Fel has really bad accuracy, but also because he joins like 2 chapters before the end and can't make it to the front. He joins by the time Generation 2 has already hit its full swing of difficult enemies and units that don't even have to be child units that can wield legendary weapons. And so he just kind of shows up and then gets stuck behind everyone else and probably gets put to sleep.
It's notable that his join chapter is clearly set up to try to give him good unit feel, because he joins in the castle before you end up having to fight a bunch of wyverns, and he still has bad unit feel.
Yeah, it's like... That's the one thing about Faval, is that the U-Fel allows him to one-shot wyverns in Wyvern Knights of Thracia.
Yeah, but Aselio can't.
No, I've never used him. I've never done a substitute run. I'm debating doing a substitute run at some point in the future. If FE4 wins on my current poll of what Fire Emblem to play next, I might end up having to use him because it's going to be an FE4 Iron Man, so who knows what's happening there. But yeah, I've never used him. I don't know how to tier him, but he seems pretty bad.
In an all-substitute run, he doesn't have access to Killer Bow, and in a run where you're not doing all substitutes, if you have him for some reason, the Killer Bow is probably better on Lester, or even whoever Lester's substitute is, because it's a horse. Or Leaf. Like, being able to canto with a bow and equip something other than a bow just means, why would you use a sniper? It sucks. It sucks. He's bad unit.
Yeah. I mean, at least he's not even that good in the arena.
This is Rev Gunter. I think he's the worst Jagan in the series. I've heard people say that Vander is the worst Jagan in the series. I think Rev Gunter is the worst Jagan in the series. He's just so heavily outclassed by Corrin.
So Rev Gunter, Rev Gunter asks the question, are you willing to use a unit slot for a stat backpack?
I would argue that Rinka also asked that question, though.
Yeah, Rev Gunter specifically for Corrin is a better stat backpack. Maybe not backpack, but like because of Forceful Partner.
True, Forceful Partner is good, but in Rev, you can't build support points with him for some mysterious plot twist reason. So he's probably going to be a worse stat backpack than like Great Knight Jacob would be, right?
Yeah, he's useful for a couple chapters as like that stat backpack, but stat-wise, combat-wise, trying to use him, especially in Revelations, he is getting not one-rounded by the enemies right away, but definitely two-rounded, and he will never gain stats because his growths are just FE1 Jagan tier.
I will say, I can't think of one utility for him that is, I feel like, a little overlooked. I think it's the third chapter of Revelations is the Fuga's Wild Wide chapter, and you usually want flyers in that map, even if you're not trying to skip it, just because navigating that map without flyers is a pain in the ass.
And he can reclass into a Draco Knight?
Yeah, he can natively reclass into a Wyvern with the second seal you have available at that point. Sakura can go Pegasus Knight, but you probably want her as a healer. And Tsubaki is natively a Pegasus. But I think having access to a second flyer for that map, even if you're not planning on fly skipping it, is just super useful because of the layout of that map. I had him ferrying Corrin around on that map in my last Rev playthrough, just because, you know, someone gets blown around by the wind, they can go inside of Gunter, and Gunter can bring them to a safe space, or he can fly them up back into the combat if they get blown away from it.
Yeah. Revelations map design is basically just, okay, try to have as many flyers as you can so you can ignore most of these awful map gimmicks, or at least work around them.
Yeah.
I think also because of Revelations' incredibly limited early deployment, you're basically forced to have some value from Gunter, kind of like you are from Vander.
Or
so
Boars.
I would, or even Boars, yeah. So I would say, yeah, some utility, greatly outclassed, but there is some utility there.
I only mentioned Boars because we mentioned the same thing with him, and what you were saying was reminding me, and I was like, oh, well, they should probably be in the same tier then.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like that's all these units here in this tier is just you have them for a couple chapters when you don't really have anyone else. Might as well.
I know there's a lot of people in the Fire Emblem community who don't like using a unit if they're only going to use them for a portion of the game, but I think that there's value in early game and even mid game filler units. Like,
play to the chapter, not to the end game.
Exactly. Like, don't ignore the end game, especially if it's not a blind run. But like, we can beat these games blind, so you don't have to be training your end game squad.
That said, that's also why I don't like Conquest, because I play to the chapter and then I end up at the final map without dedicated pass rescue trick, without enough pass rescue dedicated tricksters to skip that map, and that's apparently the only way to finish that map. So, yikes. This isn't about Conquest.
Speaking of the rescue staff, let's talk about the mounted rescue staff unit. This is Radiant Dawn Mist.
Yes, mounted.
Mounted.
How heavy can we get these air quotes? I mean, she gets a unique promotion item in Act 4 if you haven't... I don't even know if you have... She gets a unique promotion item that can only be used for her that just puts her to exactly the same class as you would have if you just gave her a Master Crown. I think it's only really important in the Japanese version where you can't promote to Tier 3 through experience, and Master Crowns are super limited. But the Holy Crown is...
Can she not I thought she couldn't promote with the Master Crown. I thought she needed her unique one. Am I wrong about that? It's been a while since I played Radiant Dawn.
Could be something from the Japanese version. I remember the Japanese version treats those tier 3 classes weirdly.
Yeah.
Either way, I've never really used Mist. Like, I did promote her with the Holy Crown once, got that horse, and then, immediately you have her for the indoor Oliver's chapter before going into the tower.
You promote her for a chapter where mounted units get a -2 move penalty and also can't go up the ledge. Whoop-de-doo.
Yeah. Can we also talk about how Florette, her personal weapon, I feel like they meant to make it a magical sword. It even says that it's a magical sword, but it still is a physical sword because they just forgot to actually flag it as magical.
Do you think that's a translation error, or do you think that that's an error in, like, a coding error? Like, do you think it was supposed to deal magical damage, or do you think it wasn't supposed to say magical damage? Because I know there's a lot of issues around Radiant Dawn's translation, so I wouldn't be surprised if it's just supposed to be, like, the Wind Edge is physical, so a 1-2 range physical sword isn't unheard of.
Yeah, no, all the other swords are physical. I don't even remember if there's a sonic sword in the game. I think because it is specifically noted only on Florette that it was meant to be magical. Because it's also Mist's special weapon. But that also could just be me huffing the copium. I think that Mist is... I don't know. Like, there's some utility to be had in having her as a healer in the early Act 3 maps.
Yeah. Even with Riss, like, 2 healers is not bad for those early maps.
Yeah, especially because those early maps, you were with the Grail Mercenaries, you have Titania and Ike, but you're facing enemies that actually damage you and pose something of a threat, at least for a little bit, and so you're generally going to want to have a couple heals here and there.
I'd say greatly outclass some utility, right?
Yeah, that probably means that she's in that tier with everyone else who has those sorts of restrictions on them.
Give me 1 second to fix my formatting. Be right back. Surprise, surprise, we spent way too long talking about bad units. Turns out there's a lot to say. See you next time for part 2. Bye-bye.